we see that this gap that has been created, if not filled, we could have 6 million more by 2029.
I think it's important to name the elephant in the room. The mantra was America first. And the language framing interventions globally as if it is a disadvantage to the United States.
We are in danger, and we are calling the governments of the world to stand together again and keep this fight on. It's easy to reverse progress. That's what's happened in our country.
So hello everyone, welcome to the Readiness Report with me, Redi Tlhabi. Today's guest is just a force of nature. I mean that. She's actually a mechanical engineer by training, but she's a feminist, a freedom fighter by conviction, and one of Africa's most respected global voices on justice and equality. You've seen her at the United Nations, at the AU, at the World Bank. You've seen her at conferences advocating for the poorest amongst us. She's in South Africa, actually, my country, even as I'm here in Washington. I'm talking about the executive director of UNAids, Winnie Byanyima. This is a role where she advocates fiercely for health equity and the rights of the most vulnerable. But it isn't just about talking about the state of AIDS and HIV/AIDS funding. It is also the geopolitical moment where we see that systems that are designed to help save lives are being gutted right here from the most powerful capital in the world. So what is the state, the global state of HIV/AIDS funding? What do we do with these geopolitical matters where politics is used to trump the most basic social justice requirements? Let me tell you that UNAids is going to be launching its much-awaited report in South Africa, yes, in Johannesburg tomorrow. And we are privileged here at the Readiness Report to speak to the executive director herself. Welcome to the program, Winnie Byanyima. It's great to be with you.
Thank you very much, Redi. Thank you for having me on this very important podcast. Delighted.
Mm-hmm. Let's start with your work then. You've got a report coming tomorrow, but I'm also thinking there are other matters at play. We are halfway to the 2030 Sustainable Development Goal to end AIDS as a public health threat. Are we on track? And if not, where are we falling short?
Last year, the report is for last year, data for last year. We were moving successfully. We were on course globally to the extent that we're reducing new infections and reducing deaths. Our data showed that new infections since at their height, 2010, have progressively reduced by 40%. Deaths had declined by 54%. The picture varies from region to region, but looked at globally, there was progress, though not enough to reach the 2030 goal of ending AIDS as a public health threat, but we're moving in the right direction. 40.8 million people were living with HIV/AIDS, and out of those, 31.6 were on treatment. Huge success by the whole world. We also had 9.2 million people who are still not on treatment whom we need to find. We had 1.3 million new infections, which is a gap that we need to close. But we were moving until February this year, when there was a major disruption. The biggest provider of external assistance to developing countries, announced an abrupt cut, an abrupt freezing of development aid, including what came to HIV/AIDS. This has put the progress we are having at risk. This is also, of course, accompanied by gradual cuts by other donors. The other donors had also been cutting, especially since the war in Ukraine started. So this taking away suddenly, abruptly, means that developing countries that were highly dependent on this aid, mostly in Africa, were appended. Clinics were shut. services stopped. And now you do see, we've begun to see, we don't have the report for this year, but we have enough information to say a few things. We see that this gap that has been created, if not filled, could result in 6 million additional infections, additional to this 1.3. We could have 6 million more by 2029. We could have 4 million deaths by 2029, additional deaths. So the progress was there, but it was fragile, and now it is at risk. It is made worse by a global backlash against rights, against laws and policies that enable people to come forward to get life-saving support. We see, for example, that for the first time since we started recording this data about HIV, the number of countries that criminalize key populations, the groups at risk, has increased for the first time. You have a country like Uganda, Mali, Trinidad and Tobago putting in place harsher laws against LGBTQ people. So the environment, enabling environment, is worsening as well. So we are in danger, and we are calling the governments of the world to stand together again and keep this fight on. But it's not all such doom and gloom. We see countries fighting. We see governments stepping in, even though they are fiscally constrained. We are seeing some governments putting in more money to try to take over and fill the gap for themselves. That's positive. But many others are very challenged and are not filling in enough. We're seeing communities standing firm and doing everything they can, having lost their contracts to deliver services for their people in the communities, still coming forward to pull their people together to send them for services.
Let's talk about global solidarity. Let's talk about global solidarity. I mean, the United States had an election. I think it's important to name the elephant in the room and not pretend that it's not there. And the mantra was America first. And the language framing interventions globally as if it is a disadvantage to the United States, whereas the world needs to be moving towards a shared prosperity, to see that programs like PEPFAR and the Global Fund are not just rich nations or the United States just gifting poorer nations. There is a moral reason, a moral case for it, but there's also a link between inequality and the spread of pandemics. You've said that before, that inequality drives pandemics. Can we talk about that in that kind of framing of shared prosperity, and that when countries like the US invest in the global fight against HIV and AIDS, it's not taking anything away from them?
You're right. Year after year, what our reports, this annual report shows, is that the HIV response is one of the greatest stories of success in global health. And why is that? Because it's a story of the solidarity of countries, understanding that a pandemic is global and that a pandemic spreads or starts as an outbreak of a disease and is able to become a pandemic because it rides on the cracks of inequalities. It will always be following those cracks of inequalities. If you reduce the inequalities, then people can defend themselves and an outbreak won't grow. Now, when it breaks out and the richer countries help themselves and don't take a global approach, it continues to fester in poorer countries. And it comes back to haunt them. An epidemic that doesn't end just keeps coming back to haunt everybody. So it's such wrong analysis to consider that coming together to fight a global problem is against the self-interest of a country. It's actually in their own self-interest, of the self-interest of every country to work together to solve a pandemic. Look now, we have in the HIV response, countries that have been contributing towards it financially. But the developing countries should not be seen as countries that were just sitting there and recipients of aid. No, actually, the bulk of the resources to fight in their countries are their own resources. It's their doctors and nurses and clinics and who are fighting this disease. What is additional when it comes to them? It is actually a right, because this disease didn't just spring up in Africa. It's global. We don't even know where it started, but it is here and it's lasting in the developing countries because they are poorer and they are not able to move as fast as the richer countries. It took 12 years before we were able to get ARVs. Those 12 years, it was spreading like a fire. Let me give you the example of South Africa. South Africa is a global leader in the fight against HIV/AIDS. That is why we are launching this report here, to showcase what developing countries are putting down to fight this disease. South Africa has the biggest burden, 8 million people. 6 million of them are on treatment, mostly paid for by their own government. 80% of their response, more than that, is paid for by South Africa. The support from outside is little. But let me tell you, it gets better. South Africa is also the center of global research on HIV.
Yes,
Vaccine
exactly.
test research on a cure is happening right here in this country. Paid for by, yes, some external assistance and South African institutions and researchers and people who put their bodies there to be trialed on, all in this country. Whatever is found is for the benefit of the whole world, not just South Africa. That money was pulled away. A big fraction was pulled away through the PEPFAR fees. Now, do you know what? South Africa will not stop, has been talking to Gates Foundation, to Wellcome Trust, and is reaching an agreement with them to put down its own resources up to about $400 million to be matched by Gates and Wellcome Trust so that this global research continues. This is a contribution from a highly burdened country to the world. So let's be clear,
Indeed.
the global solidarity is needed, and it's solidarity every country is putting in an effort to end a common problem.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you shared that, because there's always this depiction as if it's money coming from the global north to treat sick Africans. That funding for HIV and AIDS is not just about treatment. It is about innovation. Africa has gifted the world with its ideas, which is with its expertise and so on. So we have to think about that broadly as people who are supporters of Donald Trump. Even in South Africa, I have said, USAid, gut USAid dependency. It's not that. We are global citizens, and what happens in one part of the world affects another. And those of you who are looking at the bottom line, you have to think about it this way. Trump announced a commercial diplomacy as his engagement tool for Africa. How are you going to make money as America on an African continent that is burdened by disease? So it really doesn't make sense. But Winnie, let's just talk about this. There is a broader frustration. I feel it certainly in the global south, that money exists for wars and bailouts. And by bailouts, I mean our own governments are bailing out state entities that are not performing, yet no money for health, climate, or hunger. Just talk to me about that kind of imbalance in global financing, but also bringing in institutions like the World Bank, the IMF. I know they are Bretton Woods institutions. They are the US's tool for diplomacy, foreign policy, you name it. But they're important institutions and they do important work. What reforms do you see there to help further this fight against HIV and AIDS?
We have just come back from the Financing for Development Conference in Seville, Spain, where all the countries of the world were trying to look at development financing, there seems to be, and I think it is so, that the consensus around aid is kind of waning. We see aid being cut as the aid givers put their money into what they consider their other priorities, like wars in wherever they are fighting wars and whatever. Now, if I don't look at that and look at the moral issue there, that instead of saving lives, you are investing more and more in weapons to kill lives, to take away lives. That the immorality of that, let's leave that. But let's look at the injustice that Africa suffers from the global economic system that could be fixed so that we don't need aid, so that we have our own resources to pay for our health, to pay for our children's education, to pay for what we need. Take 2023. I'll take that year. Africa got aid up to $72 billion, ODA, right? And lost through illicit financial flows, 88 billion. That's a figure from UNCTAD. So it got 72 as aid, lost 88 in terms of manipulating tax rules and avoiding to pay their fair share. Most of this money is going to the rich north, to their countries. This money that goes untaxed comes back to them. Flood. Africa in the same year paid $101 billion in terms of debt repayments, both on interest and principal. $101 billion. So think about it. For every $1 of aid that came on the continent in that year, there were 2 or 3 others that went back to the rich countries, a perverse flow of resources. That is why Africa does not collect the domestic revenues it's due, because it's tax dodging, because debt is crippling the economies, and economies are not growing to produce more tax revenues. So if you don't solve those problems, then we are condemned to always be asking for aid and unable to pay for the things that are most important to our people. So in Seville, the governments of the world said they are going to be very ambitious, and they put the UN into the mix with the IFIs, World Bank and IMF, to work on a quick resolution of the debt issue. Because most of our countries here, which are highly burdened, are also moving towards debt distress. They have got unsustainable levels of debt, taking 4 to 5 times more in terms of paying interest than to health of people. So they said, let them move quickly towards that solution and let the UN be also a driver in this. That's good. Then there's also a convention going on, a negotiation at the UN on tax collaboration to close these tax loopholes. That too, there was a call for all of the countries to engage deeply and get the convention out soon so we can stop the hemorrhaging of, the stealing of, the exportation of our revenues, unpaid tax through unpaid tax. That is also a resolution there. So let them commit and do these things. We don't have to be depending on aid. We can raise the taxes from production in our own countries if they are not manipulating the global system to their advantage.
Yeah. Winnie, before I let you go, I have to just shift respectfully to a personal matter. In fact, it's personal and political, really. Deeply personal for you and your children, deeply political for Uganda, for Africa. Your husband, Dr. Kizza Besigye, has been repeatedly harassed and detained by Ugandan authorities. And there was a really traumatic image at some point of him having lost a whole lot of weight, not getting access to treatment, being unlawfully detained by Yoweri Museveni's government. What is the current situation? How is he doing? And what needs to happen to change all of this?
Thank you for asking. And putting it right, it is a political problem because he's a political leader who, over the last 20 years since he started contesting presidential elections, he's in and out of jail, trumped-up charges that usually get dismissed by court. He's never been convicted even once. He's been arrested more than 50 times. And this time, too, I believe that the trumped-up charges will be dismissed by a court. What's the injustice of it right now is that he's not being given bail. That is his right. He's being held in humiliating, painful conditions in that jail he's in. He's actually imprisoned within a prison and being denied bail. And the case keeps being prolonged because the prosecutor says they are not ready to prosecute. So it's a huge injustice to him. It's a political challenge. It's a country where there have been many reversals on the path towards democracy. And sadly, I see that also happening in the region as we see reversals in democracy in other parts of the world, in the so-called liberal democracies of the West. This seems to empower our younger democracies, the dictators there, to pull backwards too on human rights, on civic rights. This is what's happening in Uganda. But for now, we are confident that should the case come before the court finally, that it will be dismissed. But meanwhile, his denial of bail is very, very painful. He was abducted. He never was arrested. He was thrown before a military court. We had to fight in court to get him out of the military court. Then he was denied the civilian court. He had to go on hunger strike. That's when you saw him looking starved.
Oh, yes.
He went on hunger strike before the case came back to the normal courts. And now the normal courts are scared of hearing it. So thank you for asking. These are the pains, the trials and tribulations of growing a democracy. We are going to be in these battles for a long time. I had hoped in my lifetime would be stable in my country, but we have lived through 2 wars. And during those 2 wars, we believed at least the second time that we were in a revolution for change. But look at I think we learned that it's easy to reverse progress. It's so easy to reverse progress. That's what's happened in our country. Thank you for asking.
Well, democracy matters. Silence is not an option, whether it is about fighting for equality, for democracy, for the right to health, whether it is about fighting for innovation and access to healthcare. The fight matters. Thank you so much for talking to us on the Readiness Report, and we'll be watching the launch of the report in Johannesburg.
Thank you,
Thank you so much, Winnie.
I've enjoyed being on your platform. Thank you.
Love talking to you. Great admiration. See you at UNGA.
See you there.
Tunga.